At one stage, the tow became so difficult that they only covered 30 miles in 24 hours. As you will have gathered by now, a lot of very highly skilled men had already been involved in the operation, and the crew of the tug were no exception. They spent 49 days at sea, towing at about 5 knots. But on the 23rd of June they arrived, just down the river from Bristol, at Avonmouth. With a fleet of ships and small boats coming to meet her, she came safely into calm water and moved slowly towards the lock gates. And you might easily imagine that with her safely inside the lock and out of the sea, the problems were over at last. But they weren't. Certainly, here in this great dock, she was safe for the moment. Apart from her Falkland Island ensign, she had brought with her a lot of problems, not only for Dr. Corlett and the Great Britain Project Committee, but also for the men who were planning how to get her back into the water and up the river to Bristol. Getting her off the pontoon turned out to be quite a problem, but in just over a week they were ready, despite the wind, which didn't help anybody. The pontoon lay empty again, and in the very early morning they started.
All right, that'll do, Warren.
With a Bristol pilot controlling the whole operation, and with the 2 Port of Bristol tugs, one behind and one in front, she was nudged, eased and persuaded out of the dock at Avonmouth and into the river, ready to be towed very gently on the flood tide towards Bristol. Remember when you watch this operation that there's no way of steering her apart from the 2 tugs. With the Royal Naval Escort in front to lead her, she started 7 miles of one of the trickiest rivers that any reasonable-sized ship could attempt to navigate. Just one slight error of judgment or one mistaken command, and in this river she could go aground in a matter of seconds. Already the river has become very narrow, and the worst part by far is just coming into view. Horseshoe Bend is notoriously difficult. With a crosswind and strong currents, this is the place where the tugs proved that they knew exactly what they were doing. With a rise and fall in the tide of 39 feet, just one touch on the mud would be disaster. They took her close into the bank, pulled her steadily round, and without any fuss at all, she was through.
Go ahead, Dockmaster.
As she came up on this early Sunday morning, it was obvious that a lot of people were going to be there to meet her. 100,000 people from all over Britain, lining the bank and crowding the famous Clifton Suspension Bridge, built by Brunel himself, the same man who had designed the Great Britain. They had got up at crack of dawn to see Brunel's ship sail under Brunel's bridge. It was the greatest moment of the whole journey. She came up to the lock, right in the middle of Bristol. They brought her through the narrow opening without even touching the sides, and with Dr. Corlett himself on board, she came home after 127 years. The salvage crew had completed a brilliant operation, and Jack Hayward was there to meet her, ready to celebrate with Dr. Corlett almost the end of the voyage. But not quite the end. There was still one more stage to go. They had to wait another 2 weeks to complete the whole operation. In fact, they had to wait for a high spring tide to give them enough water to float the Great Britain back into the small dock in which she had been built. As it happened, the right tide was on the evening of July the 19th, exactly 127 years after she had been floated out for the first time with Prince Albert in attendance. This time, Prince Philip was aboard to see her get back, at least to see if it was possible. He knew, just as the men in charge knew, that if the water didn't make as much as everybody expected, and it can happen, then she wouldn't go through the gate. At most, she'd have less than a foot of water under her keel at the gate, and there was less than 20 minutes of high tide in which to get her through. They swung her across the river, passed the lines to the dockers on shore, and waited.
Wait! Go ahead, driver.
They brought her stern right up to the gates. For Leslie O'Neill, who had been in charge of floating her off the beach, just as much as for the dockers themselves, it was a nasty moment. She might easily stick halfway through the gates, and if she did, would break in half like a matchstick. The water rose, and the ship rose with it. 3 inches, 2 inches, 1 inch to go. Just enough water to slide her over. Everyone was watching the mark on the side of the dock.
Just easy on this. Easy. Just keep the slack up, let her drift back.
If the calculations and the measurements were right, there should be 7 inches of water over the sill and under the keel. But remember, there are over 300 feet of keel that have to pass. Dr. Corlett's template had given them 7.5 inches on either side.